Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are Group 2 from English Literature A, and in this opportunity, we are going to present our material about areas of research in literature. Our presentation will be divided into some subtopics, but before we continue our explanation, let me introduce my group's members first. Muhammad Edi as the first speaker, Nuranisa Az-Zahra as the second speaker, Mirna Devi Ramlan as the third speaker, me, Rizkawati Kadir, as a moderator and the fourth speaker, Firmansyah Salimin as the fifth speaker, and the last speaker will be Anugrah Dwi Muharomi. Okay, let's continue our first explanation about forms of literature, and literary theories and critical concepts will be delivered by Muhammad Edi. Time is yours.
Okay, thanks for the chance, moderator. So now I'm going to explain about literatures in the West and the East began as poetry. Literary forms develop and decay also. Personal essay, which was at the height in the 19th century. England with Charles Lamb and William Hazlitt came to Marathi with N.S. Padak and so on. But like sonnet in Marathi, personal essay also lost its place in Marathi literature. For literary forms change their nature and sometimes their traditional mode of expression. For example, the English novel from Daniel Defoe to Ernest Hemingway and from Jane Austen to Virginia Woolf has traveled a lot. E.M. Forster explained the aspects of the novel, and Kafka gave the form a new dimension. G.A. Kulkarni was influenced by Kafka and Arun Sadhu by James Joyce. Literary forms thus emerge, develop, decay, travel and influence others, and modified by the masters. They embody the change in the society, change in human life, and the changing perceptions of the masters. The men of letters research organizes, manages, analyzes, interprets, and evaluates such changes in the forms or literary genres. Research refers as the contribution of the genius to his literary form, to the technique and refinement of language, for example, style along with his understanding of life. The subject of genre is closely related to history of literature and literary criticism, and their interrelations are also very significant. In this context, research in literary forms, if considered from Indian point of view, along with that of the West, will provide a number of new avenues to research students. So now let's go into the second explanation, the second topic of our group's discussion. It is about literary theories and critical concepts. According to Matthew Arnold, creative power works with ideas, the best ideas current at the time. For him, a great work of literature is a work of synthesis and exposition, not of analysis and discovery. The task of analysis and discovery is probably the work of the critics and thinkers in a society. The philosophers, social thinkers, and scientists create an atmosphere of great and vibrating ideas which is necessary, according to Arnold, for great literary achievements. Imagism, symbolism, naturalism, Marxism, absurd movement, myths, feminism and ecofeminism, construction and deconstruction, modernism and postmodernism, all lead us to believe that literature is really mystic and one tends to be agnostic. Research in such literary theories and concepts is necessary to make an agnostic reader a believer in literature. Al-Ahmed, in his literature entitled Has Literature Failed?, remarks that literature has not failed us, but literature of fashion and formula, literature of sex and violence, mindless affirmation, and endless wandering into the underworld of the unconscious. The portrayal of boredom and frustration of a mindless rage have criticism has become an elitist industry when criticism is only about critics and it is going astray. Against this background of the complexity and variety of critical theories, one feels that today the literary theories make a student of literature relevant to enjoy literature, which is its primary function. In our traditions, literature beneficial theories evolved in the last few decades tend to divide and discourage the literary interest and thereby divide the society into sects and fragments. Marxist criticism through the arbitrary for identity are relevant to the Western society. But after all, these are it is a unified approach to literature and life. Lest we should surrender our goodness and cultured way of life to the evil forces of the west wind. It is a time to the arms of the west wind and to welcome the members of our own family long awaiting outside for justice and peace. Research in this context may reconcile us with our heritage and purpose of life. For this, as Arnold has said, one must know English and at least one more modern Indian language other than one's own, because that combination may provide a comprehensive perspective. Such research will keep us from motivation. Motivations of cultural nationalisms and sentimental affinities and affections. For such objectivity, English is required because one does not know Indian literature who only knows Indian literature alone.
Okay, now we are moving to the second speaker about interpretation of literary works. Nuranisa Zahra, time is yours.
Okay, I want to explain about interpretation of literary works. Interpretation is an implicit argument about a text's different meanings, its implied themes, values, and assumptions. It pays special attention to the text's contradiction, tension, and ambiguities. Interpretation also recognizes how the cultural context of the text and the reader might influence our interpreted conclusion. After we have developed our own interpretive skills, we will enter a conversation with the broad community of scholars first and professional critics. The final unit focuses on the skill of criticism, research, and revision. The first, criticism. Criticism is the art of analysis and questioning the text, themes, values, and assumptions identified in the process of interpretation. A good literary critics resist the tendency to automatically bite into the text worldview. Considering what the text doesn't say and critique is argument from edit stance. Literary critics use different theoretical approach when interpreting text and the priority of revision. We will write regularly throughout the entire course to develop a paper that changes a community of scholars. The second, research. Literary critics do research in order to participate in the conversation scholars are having about a certain text. And the last, review. Okay, I think that's all for me.
Okay, now we are going to the next material. Will be delivered by Mirna Devi Ramlan. Times is yours.
Okay, next material is Indian writing in English. English literature has been designated variously as Indo-Anglican literature. It means that the Indian contribution to English literature in Indian writing in English are the significant works that constructed the foundation of Indian writing. During the last 2 centuries, Indian writers have enriched the literary forms like poetry, novel, drama, prose, and short story by their significant contribution. Today, literary creation and criticism is being scattered into pieces affecting the basic integrity and unity of the people. The study will also reveal what belongs to our tradition unrelated to today. It means that unnecessary patriotism and sentimental ego should stay away from our research. According to Amaya Dev, they are exclusive. He said that it's only rare that a writer is interested in another, despite being located regionally and without essential ties to each other. The Indian linguistic press clearly has more influence on the depth of reach, but as long as writers write and readers read and don't listen to conferences, the future of English writing in India is assured. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, now as the fourth speaker, I'm going to explain about the history of literature. The slide, please. So, what is history of literature? The history of literature is the historical development of writings in prose or poetry that attempt to provide entertainment, enlightenment, or instruction to the reader, listener, or observer, as well as the development of the literary techniques used in the communication of these pieces. According to Robert S. Spiller, literary history is not the history of language, nor is it a textual analysis nor literary criticism. It is concerned with describing and explaining the expression in the literature of a people during a period of time, in a place, and usually in a specific language. What literary history deals with? So, literary history deals with the materials of literature. It is in itself a form of literature. Literary works exist in the terms of 4 factors. There are ideas, culture, institution, tradition, and myth. Next slide, please. Well, now, the development of English literature. The earliest written works in Old English were probably composed orally at first and may have been passed on from speaker to speaker before being written. There are Old English, Middle English, and modern English. Some of Chaucer's work is prose and some is lyric poetry that is very famous, but his greatest work is mostly narrative poetry, which we find in Troilus and Chrysides, and the most familiar is the Canterbury Tales. And then the timeline of the history of English literature. There are 8 periods of English literature. There are Old English, Middle English, the Renaissance, the Neoclassical period, the Romantic period, the Victorian age, the Edwardian period, the Georgian period, the modern period, and the postmodern period. That's all from me. Okay, now we are moved to the 5th speaker, Firmansyah. Time is yours.
Okay, I'm going to continue our group's discussion, which is about translation. Translation of a work of art from one language into another is one thing, and study of the literature of one language translated it into another is another. Yet the second is possible if only the first is available. We study Dostoevsky, Ruskin, Ibsen, Emile Zola, Kafka, Dante, Goethe, Cervantes, etc. only because their writings have been translated from their own language into English. It is said that any significant book published in any other European language other than English is translated into English within a span of 6 to 10 months. Globalization, computerization, commercialization bring all the countries in the world together. In this unprecedented and unique situation in the human history, every nation is entrusted to know that the other ones, knowing each other and knowing the entire global scenario in a given field is necessary for 2 reasons. The compulsion of the interaction and the need for trade and commerce. Translation is required for both. It is also believed that translations can bring the necessary harmony among nations. Translation has been a major shaping force in the development of world culture. Uh, Research in translation is of 2 kinds. Research the studies the process of translation from one language to another and the actual work of translation. Producing a book of translation. Many universities in India, like the Yashavantarao, Savan, Maharashtra Open University, have accepted to grant a good translated word for the award of a research degree. Research in translation can be 2 types: translation from a foreign language in one into one of the Indian language, and translation from one of the Indian language into foreign language, Indian literature. Uh, the role of translation in the creation of regional or national literatures has not received adequate attention in the Indian context. The rejection of mimetic and positivistic concept of language has enabled students of translation studies to move beyond the narrow confines of linguistic and semantics equivalence. It is also necessary to look at translation from the interdisciplinary perspective of cultural studies. A rewarding area of inquiry ought to be the contribution of translation towards redefining literary forms. Translation addresses the which is latent in a culture, something for which no vocabulary, discourse, image, or metaphor exists.
Okay, now we are moved to the last speaker. It is about qualities of a good researcher. Anubadwi Moharomi, times is yours.
So As the last speaker, I'll describe about qualities of a good researchers. Researchers is essentially a product of intelligence and workmanship. A worker should have the qualities which his work demands. The principle of job requirement is very significant in any field. An interview is necessary to ascertain that the candidate has the necessary qualities required by the job for which he is to be selected. In order to be qualified as a good researcher, here are some of the types of researchers with quality. First, a good reader. Ideally, a researcher is expected to come to the supervisor with a topic of his choice, which is an outcome of his previous reading. That previous reading should have created certain curiosity of in his mind, and that should be reflected in the first dialogue between the student and the guide. Good reading requires several skills. Reading between the lines is its first requirement. A research student should know that everything in print is not true, so you must be able to read with a sense of relevance and fidelity. A good deal of previous reading with these qualities leads a student to select his topic. It is to be noted carefully that good reading improves writing. Good reading requires the knowledge of punctuation mark, sentence structures, literary devices like image, metaphor, simile, symbol, irony, humor, and satire, etc. Good reading is a way to establish meaningful dialogue with the writer through his words. Naturally, these things are taken care of while one's writers. Reading improves style. A good reader develops his or her own style because reading influences the choice of words, intonation, and niceties of language. And two, research temperament. An extrovert person who is easily and quickly carried away or moved by emotion, feelings, and instinct find it rather difficult to complete his thesis writing within the normal span of time. Research work requires stable mind, rather cool and patient. Patience really pays in research. Curiosity is a mark of research temperament. Research is a kind of pursuit, and without curiosity, one cannot pursue the matter up to its logical end. Curiosity and inquiry go hand in hand. Only curiosity is not enough. The inquiring should follow it. However, research temperament does not get satisfaction until the logical and rational solution is found out. Research temperament does not accept superficial answer and tentative solution. That is the significant mark of it. 3. Capacity and willingness for hard work. What we call hard work is actually the clerical work. In a thesis, it is required every now and then. It is in data collection, taking down the notes, preparing the drafts, preparing the bibliography, documentation and reference, making the revisions, redrafting and correction, proofreading, the writing itself. 4. Motivation. There are a number of agents or factors that provide motivation. A good teacher, a rival, an ideal person, good salary promised, aspiration for position, a person who is dearer and nearer, thirst for knowledge and scholarship. Research work without any motivation is a hard nut to crack. Number 5, intellectual discipline.
You may read what I put on the PPT.
Okay. And mana tadi? Oh, intellectual discipline. Researcher requires a predetermined framework. In research, nothing is abrupt or sudden. Nothing like spontaneous overflow or powerful feelings. Logical planning and rational argument are the aspect of intellectual discipline in research. A thesis is neither a matter of over-communication nor of under-communication. It is an act of adequate and just communication. This is a significant mark of intellectual discipline in research. Imagination. Imagination is necessary while preparing the design of the research project. Any research work needs to be comprehensive and every part of it should contribute to the whole. In this, it has its own form like that of a poem. Next, sense of relevance. In research, sense of relevance is necessary for drafting the initial synopsis, preparing the design of the research work, drawing conclusion or findings, drafting the final synopsis, preparing the abstract. The next, scientific attitude. In such a situation, the researcher must adhere to the logical and rational approach and accept the natural result. A good researcher, therefore, should have scientific attitude. Next, language skills. The sense of style and the understanding of language behavior are very essential qualities of researchers. Language skills, thus, are very crucial and essential. A research student should have acquired the skills before he starts his research work. And the last is courage. A good researcher should have courage. So I think it's all. Thank you.
Okay, that's all the presentation of our group. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.